to introduce the topic of authentic leadership development. This is a fairly new topic with recent and popular books and articles beginning to be published around 2003. But before we talk about authentic leadership, let's define what we mean by leadership. The word is used in many ways, and I've provided a simple definition here, and in fact it's a general way of thinking of leadership, which is not a position or a role or a situation of someone being more dominant than another person. In fact, leadership is defined as a process of motivating people to voluntarily take action towards shared goals. And I've underlined a couple key words to emphasize what this process really means. So motivating people to voluntarily take action is a key part that defines leadership from other things such as power. So if people are forced or manipulated or threatened or fear for some retribution, then that's not leadership. So again, leadership is motivating people to voluntarily take action. And the second part is that leadership is motivating people to take action towards shared goals. So the goals that people have are those that are of mutual interest and importance to both leaders and the constituents. So given this definition, the question that often occurs is how do we do leadership? And there are many, many books on this topic. And I've just highlighted 3 themes here. Most often you hear that leadership is about vision. It's called the vision thing. And so what this means is that leadership is envisioning an inspiring future. In addition, leadership is connecting this vision with individuals' goals. So it's people are connecting with the vision and it's important to them as well. And then a third theme to leadership is about developing other people into leaders. And this often starts with identifying people's strengths and encouraging them to contribute to the shared goals by using their strengths. So given this definition of leadership, let's look at what authentic leadership is. Authentic leadership is leading in a way that is true to your values and your principles and your strengths. So it's leading, what we've just described, and also being true to yourself. And that's why it's authentic leadership. And a good example of this that's often used as a person who's an authentic leader is Warren Buffett. So here's a man who's one of the most wealthiest men in the world. And to this day, he still lives in the same house that he's had for 30 years. And one of my favorite stories is when Bill Gates talks about going to Warren Buffett's house, and they sit at his table, and he doesn't have cushions on the chairs and doesn't know that he needs to have cushions on the chairs. Point is, he lives true to his values of simplicity and long-term value of his investments and his life. So he leads with his strengths and he lives true to his values. So the next thing that we look at is how do we develop authentic leadership? And there are 4 practices that have been identified to develop authentic leadership. They are practicing transparency, using balanced decision-making processes, growing your moral perspective-taking capacities, and developing self-awareness. And now we'll look at each of these. So the first is practicing transparency. This means that you're sharing the honest reasons behind decisions. This is one way that you practice transparency. So if you are a manager in a executive position, there are some information that you're exposed to that's confidential. So I'm not suggesting you share all information, but you upfront state, this is confidential, and here's what I can tell you. So it's being authentic and real about what you can share and what you can't. And people know this anyway, So it's best to be transparent about it. And the second piece is sharing your relevant thoughts and feelings. So practicing authentic leadership is being honest about what you're thinking and feeling. But this does not mean that you're sharing everything or dumping on people, as they sometimes perceive a lot of emotional expression. So it's sharing relevant thoughts and feelings for the situation that you're facing and your leadership responsibilities. The important thing about transparency is that it also builds trust, and trust is critical to effective leadership. The second practice for authentic leadership is balanced decision making. And the best example of this is the team of rivals approach. And we see Barack Obama, the President-elect of the United States, currently using this approach to select his cabinet and staff members. And what this is creating a team based on different perspectives and different backgrounds, and knowing that there's going to be conflict in the points of views that are presented. So think about the kind of person it takes to invite in conflicting points of view and conflicting discussion. And it takes both the development of the team leader as well as the team members. It takes a certain level of development to be able to have this kind of authentic dialogue. And this is what balanced decision making is about. The third practice for authentic leadership is moral perspective taking. And this is really about broadening your own capacities to find validity in all points of views. It's also about seeking a more inclusive perspective. And in the broadest sense, moral perspective taking is feeling a sense of unity with all humanity, and feeling a sense of responsibility for humanity, and finding the common goals among the groups of constituents that you're working with. And so in the end, this provides win-win options for the constituents. And then the fourth practice for authentic leadership is developing your self-awareness. Without self-awareness, it's hard for people to be authentic and true to themselves, because they're not quite aware of what their core values are. And most people do think that they're self-aware and that they are true to their values. But in my work as a coach, I know that that's not true, and a lot of people aren't really clear on what their most important value is, and even more people aren't living their lives according to those values. And from a leadership perspective, once you know these things, you will choose opportunities that are aligned with your core values. So here's some questions to think about to begin to develop your self-awareness. So the first is, where are you now on these practices for authentic leadership development? Think about the things we've talked about, and think about what level you're at in terms of your capacities for these. And second, look at your strengths. How well do you know your strengths? And how do they relate to effective leadership practices? Do you know which strengths are most effective in leadership? Which of your strengths? And how are you leveraging that information? And then thirdly is looking at your values. Identify your core values. Do you know your number one most important value? And do you choose leadership opportunities and behaviors that are aligned with this value? Then lastly, just consider that the process of developing your authentic leadership is a journey. And what this really means is it's a lifelong endeavor. So have patience, because self-awareness is a long-term process. It takes time to learn these things about yourself, as well as your own values will change across your life stages. So it's a continual investigation and inquiry into what's most important to you and how you can leverage that in the leadership process. And lastly, I leave you with this quote from Abraham Lincoln, who was one of the early users of the team of rivals approach. And what he said was, "I am not bound to win, I am bound to be true. I am not bound to succeed, but I am bound to live up to the light that I have.